Hi, I'm J.C.Hollywood. This is This Week in the 80s for the week beginning June 11th. When you think of pop music in the 80s, chances are a few names immediately spring to mind. And when you think of the most iconic performers of the 80s, a couple of those names will appear again. But when you narrow that list down to the most influential personalities of the 80s, not just in terms of music, but in terms of fashion and culture and attitude, that's a pretty short list, and one of those names will definitely be Madonna. This week is significant in the career of Madonna because it's the week she finished her first major tour. It's also the week that she started her second major tour and her first international tour just a couple of years later. By 1985, Madonna's star had already begun to rise on the back of two successful albums, 1983's Madonna and 1984's Like a Virgin, and a slew of hit singles. The appropriately named Virgin Tour would showcase both those albums and was originally conceived as an international tour, although in the end it would only serve Canada and the US, possibly because the Material Girl had never played a major show to crowds much bigger than those found in venues like CBGB. Her support act were an up-and-coming trio of rappers called the Beastie Boys, who were still a year away from releasing their breakthrough album License to Ill. Band member Adam Horovitz said it was a terrible idea, although he added that it was probably good for her because we were so awful that by the time she came on, the crowd couldn't help but be happy. And while they did boo them, their antics did draw the admiration of Madonna, who said, "I just loved them." Not content to simply stand and deliver the songs, Madonna immediately took control of the show. A sign of the powerhouse that she was to become, she wanted to create something memorable that was reflective of her style. In essence, she was not just building a show, she was building her brand. In reviewing the show, Jeff Sewell said of Madonna that she was not only selling her music, she was selling herself, and the entire package proved to be a joy, while Heidi Sherman said that she was a bona fide pop star in the process of becoming a cultural icon. The impact of the show extended far beyond the stage, with black bras, fingerless gloves and crucifixes flying off the shelves, and a new term, Madonna wannabe, entering the cultural zeitgeist. All up, the show ran for 40 performances over 3 months, culminating in a sellout show at Madison Square Garden on June the 11th. 2 years and 3 days later, June the 14th, 1987, saw Madonna's second major tour, the Who's That Girl Tour, officially launch in Osaka, Japan. The song showcased her entire catalogue, focusing on her mega hit album True Blue, released the year previous, and her forthcoming soundtrack to her film Who's That Girl. True Blue had done a lot to establish Madonna's new, mature style, and the tour helped to solidify that. In many ways, while the Virgin Tour had been a bit of a misfire, with one critic saying that she came across as more of Daddy's little girl than the rebellious pop princess that she played in her film clips, the new tour established her as a powerful force, a quote-unquote bad girl who demanded to be taken seriously. The tour was a massive hit. Her two Wembley Stadium shows sold out in a record 18 hours, while her Paris show drew a crowd of 130,000. The 90-minute show successfully incorporated multimedia elements, 7 costume changes, and choreographed numbers to rival any Broadway show. To prepare, Madonna began a rigorous training regime that included jogging, gymnastics, aerobics, weightlifting, and a strict vegetarian diet. It all paid off. In total, the tour ran for 39 shows across 8 countries and was watched by over 1.3 million people. It cemented Madonna as one of the most powerful artists of the 80s and changed the look of what stadium concerts would be forever. Coincidentally, June 16th, 1984 was the date that Madonna had her first US top 10 hit with her 5th single, Borderline. Quite often, the films that have the biggest impact on popular culture aren't the most successful at the time of their release. Other times, a box office juggernaut will imprint itself on the minds of the cinema-going public and dominate the landscape. This week, we get one of each. By 1986, director John Hughes had already made his mark on the 80s with films like 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club, but it was his 4th outing as director that arguably had the biggest impact. Indeed, it's almost impossible even today to repeat yourself in conversation without hearing the words Bueller, Bueller, Bueller rattling around in your brain. Allegedly inspired by his own high school hijinks, Ferris Bueller's Day Off was a love letter to his teenage years into the city of Chicago. Written in a week, it was filmed between September and November of 1985. John Hughes claimed that he wrote the part for Matthew Broderick because he was the only actor who could make it charming enough. The film received a mixed critical reception, with many suggesting that it pandered to the money-obsessed Reagan era. And while it was by no means a flop, quite the opposite in fact, it never managed to take the top spot at the box office, falling to the Rodney Dangerfield comedy Back to School. At the other end of the spectrum, 1982 gave us one of the most beloved films of all times, and the first film to make me cry uncontrollably, the Steven Spielberg mega hit E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Coming out at a time when presumably people didn't know what E.T. stood for, E.T. the Extraterrestrial was allegedly based on an imaginary friend created by Spielberg in 1960 after his parents' divorce. So yeah, it was always going to make you cry. The first draft of the script took 8 weeks to complete and was by all accounts almost perfect, only going through 2 minor rewrites. It was an instant hit with critics and audiences alike, fast becoming the highest grossing film of all time. A position it held for 11 years, it's still considered by many to be one of the greatest films ever made. It was nominated for 9 Academy Awards but lost the Best Picture Oscar to Gandhi. Gandhi director Richard Attenborough famously stated, "I was certain that not only would E.T. win, but that it should win." Spare a thought for the film that opened up against E.T. in 1982, a little film that featured the debut of actress Michelle Pfeiffer called Grease 2. It was less loved by critics and audiences alike. In fact, Roger Ebert described it as just a recycling of Grease, without the stars, without the energy, and without the grease. Okay, that's going to do it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'm J.C. Hollywood. I'll see you back here next week for more This Week in the 80s.